Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Haseeb. Today's your lecture is about the diuretics. We will discuss the diuretics, different categories of these diuretics. Then we will discuss their mechanism of action along with their clinical uses. Then we have discussed their pharmacokinetics and the adverse effects of these diuretics. Now starting with the first diuretic is carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. So basically if you remember the structure of the nephron, it's look like this. There is a among that there is a glomerular apparatus, then that is the basement membrane, then you will go the proximal segment goes down to the descending segment, then loop of Henle, then there is an ascending segment, and then you have that distal convoluted tubules. So when we're discussing about the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, they basically work at that point, that is the proximal segment of the nephron. So they were the first sulfonamide derivatives which are used as the diuretics. So their basic use is for treating the infantile epilepsy. The prodrug of this diuretic is an acetazolamide. So others are the dorzolamides and brinzolamides. Now, discussing about the pharmacokinetics, they are usually given orally. Benzolamide is used in an ophthalmic solution. It is basically eliminated as a biphasic manner, rapid decline in the serum levels, followed by a much slower release from erythrocytes. So basically they are biphasics, that they are rapidly decline from the serum level and then they are slowly released. The half-life of these diuretics is about 4 months. Now, as the name, the acetylzolamides basically act by inhibiting an enzyme, that is carbonic anhydrase, and carbonic anhydrase. That is basically an enzyme which are present at the proximal level, proximal tubules. Also, basically that diuretics help act by inhibiting that enzyme, as there is written that is basically proximal tubule. So they basically catalyze the conversion of that CO2 combining with an water to form that bicarbonates, and then they basically split into an hydrogen, and then that is basically bicarbonate. So basically the thing that in the eye the ciliary process form aqueous humor which are secreted into the posterior chamber of the eye along with water and others also. If we study that the lumen and that the picture, that is the lumen, that is basically that the segment of the nephron, these are the cells, and then there is the blood, so blood vessels. So this is basically there, the sodium goes there and then the bicarb comes, that hydrogen combined with that bicarbonate then HCO2 to form that salt, that is H2CO2. Then there is an enzyme, that is carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. They basically separate that compound into CO2 and water. So basically then CO2 is goes into the cell and then again combined, then cycle goes. So basically these are the diuretics which basically inhibit that enzyme, so increasing the level of that bicarbonate in that lumen. So when the level of bicarbonate is increased in that lumen, so basically that alkalize that urine. So basically they increases the pH of that urine. Now, the mechanism, they are basically action in patients with glaucoma. The glaucoma is usually a condition where you have an increased intraocular pressure. So basically these are the diuretics which decreases the pressure in the eye, so they are given in glaucoma. Acetylcholine decreases the formation of aqueous humor. So basically IOP is basically the intraocular pressure. So carbonic enzyme is required for the reabsorption of sodium bicarbonate from the proximal convoluted tubules and secretion of hydrogen ion in the connecting tubules. So pharmacological action is basically they reduce the intraocular pressure, they causes the alkalinization of the urine, they also causes a hypercholoremic metabolic acidosis. So basically when you are removing bicarbonate from the body, the leftover is the hydrogen ions. So basically they causes acidosis. So as acetazolamide is an easy way to remember, this is that an acetazolamide causes an acidosis. Acetazolamide acidosis. So they causes an acidosis. Hypercholoremic is definitely the thing when basically hypercholoremic means an increase in the level of that chloride ion. So when in the blood, when you are decreasing that hydrogen ion, the but sorry, they are bicarbonate ions. The bicarbonates are negative ions. So to maintain that balance in the blood, so we have an increased level of the chloride. So that is also a negative ion. They have a just weak diuretic effect. Now, clinical uses. Among the clinical uses, we were discussing about the diuretics. They use for alkalization of the urine, where they increases the pH of the urine, and they are also given for the prevention and treatment of the high altitude sickness or mountain sickness. As in the mountain sickness, basically there is an acidosis, so we are in that at the mountain sickness. Sorry, there is an alkalosis. So we treat them by giving the diuretic because it causes an acidosis. They are also used for the treatment of glaucoma. They are also given epilepsy in the treatment. They also treat hypokalemic episodic paralysis, and they are also used to treat hyperphosphatemia. They are the clinical uses among which that carbonic anhydrase are used. Now, what is an high altitude sickness? I just told you about that. Is basically there is a respiratory alkalosis due to the hyperventilation. So whenever you go at the high altitude, there is a decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen. So body try to compensate by that by increasing and increase in respiratory rate. So when the respiratory rate is increased, you are having a decrease in the level of CO2 in your blood because you are exhaling more CO2. So when the CO2 is basically what? CO2 is just an acid. So basically you are removing an acid via your respiration to the outside environment. So in the blood, you are having a decreased level of the acids that basically leads to that respiratory alkalosis. Whenever there is an alkalosis, there is a compensatory effect of that. So body try to adjust that by causing metabolic acidosis. That is an opposite of this is that is basically metabolic acidosis. So what the body try to do, it try to have this acid, so producing metabolic acid. The body try to have that metabolic acids, so that carbonic hydrase enhance ventilation, acclimation, and maintain oxygen during sleep at high altitude. So that is basically they are basically causing an acidosis by removing the excess of the bicarbonate. So they are beneficial in giving that high mountain. So acetazolamide also encounters the fluid retention, decreases the CSF pressure, which is eliminated in high that altitude sickness. They also prevent CSF pH, also CSF, that cerebral spinal fluid. They also prevent the fall in their pH. Due to this reason, they are sometimes used to treat in the epilepsy. They are sometimes used in the treatment of epilepsy. Now, acetazolamide in glaucoma, they are basically used in the treatment of chronic open-angle glaucoma. As I told you about that, what is a glaucoma? Glaucoma is simply an increase in the intraocular pressure. They can be occurred by various reasons. There is an acute angle or there is a chronic angle. That basically the thing, if you know about the a, a small physiology about the glaucoma, basically they are reabsorbed or they are secreted by our tiny channels in the eye. So whenever the angle of the channels are blocked or these channels are sometimes blocked for certain reasons, so the pressure tries to build up in the eye, and that condition is known as glaucoma, as it is due to that increased intraocular pressure, which is basically occur because of that an obstruction or the narrowing of that angle. They are used in acute. They are used in combination with other drugs for the treatment of an acute. Now we will discuss the toxic effects that they are basically cause drowsiness, paresthesia, headache, flushing, dizziness, and anorexia. There also leads to hyperkalemia and hyperglycemia. So basically they are removing their potassium, so they are basically causing an hypokalemia. They are also causing hypersensitive reaction because all sulfonamide derivatives usually cause that hypersensitivity reaction. Now, they are also cause precipitation of calcium salts, so they leads to the formation of renal stones. They also cause fatigue syndrome. They are also causing that hepatic encephalopathy because of that hepatic impairment. Now, if we are discussing about the drug interaction, they causes an increase in the levels of amphetamines, quinidines, and pseudoephedrines. There also increases the pH of renal tubular fluids, so decreasing the excretion of weak bases amphetamines. Now, the other one are the osmotic diuretics. Basically, what they are just an osmotic agents which draws water towards their lumen and then they excrete that water. Among that, we have glycerols, we have mannitols, we have urea, and we have that isosorbide. So they are simply the chemicals which draws waters out of the lumen towards their blood vessels, so that these can be so they try. Sorry, they basically these are the osmotic chemicals which are present in the lumen. If they are present in the lumen, that draws water from the blood towards the lumen so that they can be excreted. Now, mannitol. Among the first is the mannitol. The mechanism is as diuretics. As we are discussing it, they act on the proximal convoluted tubule. As I told you previously, that segment of the nephron, that is basically proximal tubule. Here these basically diuretic usually work. The mannitol increases the osmotic pressure of plasma and also retain water in the nephrons. Basically, what is an osmotic pressure? So if we're discussing about that osmotic pressure, they are basically pressure that is basically built by an active particles that are present in the lumen or even in the blood vessels. So these are, as I told you, the mannitol is an osmotic material or it is an osmotic chemical. So it is a particle, so that's why it increases the pressure in the plasma and they also retain that water in the nephron. The only means their osmotic pressure is that. After IV administration, mannitol is filtered at the glomerulus level and is not reabsorbed. So it is basically filtered here. That is the glomerular. They are the vessels. They are efferent arterioles and afferent arterioles. There about the physiology. So mannitol come from in that size. From there, that is absorbed into that lumen. That is the Bowman's capsule. But they are not rebagged. Then they are not reabsorbed. It is not reabsorbed, it is just present in that lumen. So it's an osmotic diuretic, so it draws the water from the blood towards the lumen. So it attracts and retains water through the nephrons into the urine, as I told you about. Pharmacological effects is basically it causes diuresis, it causes intraocular pressure reduction whenever the fluid is removed from the body. So there is a reduction in the pressure. It also causes reduction in the intracranial pressures. Now, therapeutic use is we are given an acute renal failure. Why? Because the thing is that whenever there is a renal failure, we are not able to excrete water and other chemicals from our body. So in acute renal failure, there is a volume overload in the body. To prevent that, we give that diuresis because we have to decrease that water from the body. So they are also used to maintain the renal functions and reduces the renal toxicity of cisplatin. Cisplatin is basically a therapeutic chemical agent. They are basically used in the treatment of different cancers. So one of their toxicity, but it is basically a renal toxicity because it gets precipitated in the nephrons. So basically it is removed by the flow of the water. So we give that diuretic mannitol as it increases the water. So these toxins can be washed out from the nephrons and then in that way it prevents the toxicity of that cisplatin. It also used in the drug overdose or poisoning because it causes the excretion so that the drugs or the poisons can be quickly removed or quickly excreted from the body. It is also used in the treatment of acute glaucoma. Now, if we are discussing about the adverse effects, one common thing about the adverse effect is basically that from the as we standing from that segment, all the diuretics which act among this segment, that all segments, this segment, they are all causes hyponatremic, hypokalemic, metabolic alkalosis, except the last one which causes a hyperkalemia, and that carbonic anhydrase is an exception because it causes acidosis. Otherwise, all causes that they are basically three: the loop diuretics, then We have thiazides and that they basically causes hypernatremia. They causes headache, nausea and vomiting. They also, the drug is admitted not too rapidly or given a large volume of fluid. So they causes heart failure, pulmonary congestion and edema which can susceptible patient. Now, now the last one is the potassium diuretics. Because this lecture consists of the two parts, half of them I am discussing you within this lecture and the rest one will be discussing in another lecture. So among the diuretics still we have discussed with the carbonic and hydrolase inhibitors. We have discussed with the that osmotic diuresis and they are the potassium sparing. As I told you about the structure of the nephrons, that is the distal segment. Here there is a distal segment, this one. Distal segment of the nephron. These diuretic basically work at there. As the name indication, they are the potassium and spare. So these are the diuretics which spare potassium. The other ones are the diuretics which are excreting the potassium. That's why they are causing hypokalemia. So these diuretics basically spare the potassium. So they are causing hyperkalemia. So they are the two types of the cells. They are the epithelial sodium channel blockers. There are the two types of these drugs. Number one is the epithelium sodium channel blocker, which are amiloride and triamtrene. The other ones are the aldosterone receptor blockers, which are spironolactone and eplerenone. Now, when we discussing about the mechanism of action of spironolactone, it basically competitively block the binding of aldosterones to the mineralocorticoid receptors present in tubular epithelial cells of the late distal collecting tubules and the collecting ducts. As you know, the structure of that nephron. So this segment, that is the late distal segment, they are the epithelial cells. Here these cells are present. So competitively block means that they compete with each other. So basically it competes with an aldosterone to block the effect of the aldosterone at that receptors. What does aldosterone do? The function, the normal physiological function of an aldosterone is to retain the sodium and to excrete the potassium. So aldosterone tend to have more volume of water in your body. When there is a heart failure or there is a condition where you are deficient in the water, the main thing is that is basically renin-angiotensin system. There is a whole physiology of that is a separate topic. So basically when you are in a volume deficit state, this renin-angiotensin system is activated. What it does basically renin is converted into angiotensin, then it is converted to angiotensin 2. That is another topic. So the main purpose is that there is an aldosterone is created. That aldosterone basically try to have sodium in your back in your body and eliminate the potassium. So by having a sodium in your body, sodium does what? Sodium simply draws water with it. Wherever the sodium is goes, the water follows the direction of the sodium. So you are in a water deficit state. So the purpose of aldosterone is to make your body sufficient in water. So that's why it absorbs sodium and excrete potassium. So now as we know they are the channels, they are the sodium blocker channels. They block the sodium. So they are also have an aldosterone antagonist here. They also affect the effect of that aldosterone that receptor so that the sodium can't be absorbed. So if the sodium is not absorbed, what the sodium goes to the lumen, sodium goes to that was in the sodium. Whenever there is a sodium, what the thing sodium, when there is a sodium, water follows sodium, so you are having that diuresis. So the other thing is that you are also not going to excrete that potassium. So basically what it that is increases the potassium levels. So that the diuretics basically does work in this manner. Now mechanism of action, so reduce sodium absorption as I told you and potassium excretion. Their action depends upon renal prostaglandin production and NSAID that can inhibit their function under certain conditions. So also causes hydrogen reabsorption by the intercalated cells of the convoluted tubules. When the thing is that when you are having that hydrogen, among the hydrogen is basically what is an acid. So hydrogen is absorbed, so you are having that acidosis. As I told you, above the up to the level of thiazides, you are having alkalosis, but at the distal level, you are having that acidosis because of that absorption of that hydrogen. Now, mechanism of action of amyloid. Amyloid and phenytoin directly interfere with sodium entry through the epithelial sodium channels. They also, potassium excretion is coupled with sodium entry into this segment, so potassium is spared. Now, their clinical uses, they are basically useful in mineralocorticoid excess or hyperaldosterones due to primary hypersecretion of aldosterone. There are basically certain syndromes or malignancies in the body which secrete that hydrosterone. Conn syndrome is among them. It basically secretes an increased amount of aldosterone. So to inhibit the action of that aldosterone, we are giving that potassium sparing diuretics so that the aldosterone won't work, or we are not going to have that excess water in our body. So they are also given in secondary hyperaldosteronism in the way secondary heart failure. As I told you that when you are having heart failure, the physiological principle of the body is to have the volume in the body, but up to the certain extent. When you're going to have that edema and other formation of other such things, then you have to remove that water from the body. And the other thing is that when the heart is pumping slower, so there is an increase in the workload of the heart because that aldosterone causes an increase entry of the sodium into the body. That causes, from the sodium you are also going to have water, so there is an increased level of fluid in the body. That fluid is go back to your heart, as the heart is already in failure, so it worsen that failure. They are also given for renal cirrhosis and nephrotic syndromes. The use of loop diuretics and thiazide diuretics and cause secondary hyperaldosteronism, because the thing is that they are excreting the water. So when they are excreting the water, and along with that they are also secreting the sodium. So because of that, the aldosterone levels are increased in the body. So to counterfare with that, you are having this. And also another point about loop and thiazide diuretics is that they are also decreases the potassium levels in the body. So patient is going towards an hypokalemia. So prevent that hypokalemia, these are also given because their effects is to increase potassium. So they are causing now toxicity. As I told you that one of the most important toxicity of this is hyperkalemia, but we are also use these as for our therapeutic purposes. Risk is increased agar if the patient is renal deficient, or if the patient is also decreasing, also having that drugs that reduces the renin productions like beta blockers and NSAIDs. So they reduces angiotensin activity. So then they are going to have that hyperkalemia. There also causes hypercholeremic metabolic and acidosis. That is basically increased chloride levels with metabolic acid. There the toxicities are very important among the diuretic, among the spironolactone. They are also causing gynecomastia, impotence. BPH is basically benign prostatic hyperplasia. They also causes an acute renal failure. They also causes that renal stones. Contraindications are they are not given in chronic renal insufficiency. They are not given in liver disease. Patient taking beta blockers and among ACE inhibitors, as there is an interaction of these drugs with that, and even someone is taking that ketoconazole that are anti. Now, this all is about your part 1 of your lecture among diuretics, in which we have discussed about that carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. We discussed about that thiazide diuretics. Thiazide, we discussed that potassium sparing and then osmotic diuretics. So these are the end of your assessment questions. You have to give the answer of these questions. So you have to write the mechanism of action of carbonic anhydrase inhibitors. You have to write the clinical uses of mannitol, and you have to give the side effects of that spironolactone. So you have to write these questions and submit by the time specified. This all is about your part 1 of your lecture of diuretics. Tomorrow we will start from another part in which we are discussing about the loop and the thiazide diuretics. Thank you for your today's time and for today's time. Thank you so much.